Hi everyone, welcome to another maths video by Maths with Sarah. Today we're going to be tackling this algebra question. It's asking us to simplify this equation. I'll be honest, when I first glanced at this, it doesn't look a particularly nice question, but don't worry, I'm going to talk you through it. So as with all of these videos, I encourage you to pause the video here, have a little think about how you would do it by yourself. Again, if you have any problems, don't worry about it. Just come back in a few seconds once you've had a chance to have a think about how you would tackle it, and then I will talk you through it. So this question is actually from a calculator paper, although you won't need your calculator for this question, but they sometimes like to throw in the odd algebra question into the calculator questions paper as well. So this is question 13. So around the middle of the paper, starting to get a little bit more challenging, and this one definitely I think will throw a lot of people. So what we've been asked to do is we've got this equation 8x squared minus 8 all over 4x plus 4, and it's asking you to simplify it to the form ax plus b, where a and b are integers. And it also has this little bit of information up here where it says x is, so you basically show that this is correct for all values of x, but not when it's equal to -1. And I think this again will confuse quite a few people. It just makes the question just a little bit more complex, but it does. I'll explain why at the end, and it does make perfect sense why x cannot be equal to -1. So the way that I would tackle this question, it's not necessarily, I'm not going to just do it in one big jump. I think I'm going to do it, I think, the way that most people would tackle this. Not necessarily the quickest way, not necessarily the best way. It's just the method that I think most people would use and how they would do it. So we've got 8x squared minus 8, and that is all over 4x plus 4. So obviously we noticed that we can add some brackets in here. So I think the first step that most people would do is on the top, they would remove the 8, and then they would end up with x squared minus 1. And then you can do exactly the same on the bottom. So you can, well, not quite the same, pull 4 to the outside of the bracket, and then have x plus 1 in the bracket. Okay, and if we simplify these, we know that we've got 8 and 4, so we can simplify that combination and just end up with 2, and then in bracket x squared minus 1 and x plus 1. So as you can see, these two simplify just to leave 2 on the top. So the next step is to look at this top bracket. Now, it's somewhat in disguise, but this is actually a quadratic. I think it's called, so it'll be the difference of two squares, where you end up removing, you don't have an x value. So normally if you've got a quadratic, you would have something along the lines of ax squared plus bx plus c is probably where a and b and c are numbers. But in this case, you haven't got any b of x, you haven't got just a single multiple of x, and this is because if we expand this into two brackets, and we're still going to keep the 2 as it is, we're going to have x minus 1 in one bracket, and then x plus 1 in the other bracket. And if you notice, when we multiply this out, we're going to end up with x squared minus x plus x minus 1. Okay, and then you notice that this will cancel each other out. You've got minus x plus x, that will cancel each other out, and you'll end up with just x squared minus 1, which is of course what we've got in this original bracket. So now the bottom bracket we can leave exactly as it is. We just end up with x plus 1. Now what you've hopefully realised is that on the top here you've got an x plus 1 in a bracket, And on the bottom, you've also got x plus 1. And that means that we can actually cancel these two out because you've essentially got something divided by itself. And that's going to leave us just with 2, and then in brackets, x minus 1. Okay. And if we multiply that out, we're going to end up with it in this form as they've given us here. So we'll end up with 2x minus 2. So A and B are, A is 2 and B is minus 2. Now, I said at the beginning, I think this is the bit that will throw a lot of people, where we've been given this equation where we've been told that x is not equal to minus 1. So for all values of x, this holds true that this can be simplified to this equation here, which obviously is far simpler and far nicer to work with than this complex equation here. But we've been told that it doesn't work for when x is not, so for when x is equal to minus 1, and we can't simplify it in this way. And the reason for that is actually when we look at this step here. So on the bottom of this equation, we have x plus 1. So if we substitute in, if we look at x plus 1, and we substitute in minus 1 plus 1, we're going to end up with 0. And hopefully you're aware that if you end up with, so whatever is on the top, in this case, we'd end up with 2x minus 1. And that will be times 0, because we'd be substituting in this bracket. And then we'd have 0 on the bottom as well. And obviously anything times 0 is just going to end up with 0. And the bottom is also 0. Now, for a start, it's impossible to divide anything by 0, so that's not going to work. And for second, we're just going to end up with 0 divided by 0, which is 0. So that's the reason why this x cannot be equal to minus 1. So I think, as I said at the start, this will be the bit that will confuse a lot of people, but in actual fact, it's not necessarily relevant to the question, but it's only when you get to the end that I think you can realise why that is the case and why that information is important. So another question that I think is possibly slightly deceptively difficult, I think recognising that this is a quadratic and being able to expand this into 2 brackets with the x minus 1 and x plus 1 is probably the most difficult part. Just recognising that it does look a bit like a quadratic in disguise almost. It's not obvious that that's what it is, and that's what you need to do. But hopefully you get used to recognising these. Any equation with an x squared in it can nearly always be put into 2 brackets. But hopefully you're able to follow what I did there, and you would feel happy or more confident tackling questions similar to this. So thank you for listening, and please subscribe to my channel to get the first views of any videos that I produce.